Snatching and weightlifting movements are very, very complex, and there's a lot of different issues you can make. So today we're going to look through 5 different people, look at really common snatch mistakes that a lot of you are probably making in your own training, and see how we can improve upon those and see what errors might they be causing. So first up, we've got Joe Bro here, and we can see Joe Bro's got a little bit of a press out of the bottom, a little bit of a celebration, we used to call that. So it's an early celebration, you've got the barbell overhead, and you're just really happy that the bar is successfully there. So what is causing this particular press out? So the first thing we need to look at is the jump forward. So if we watch where Joe starts, we can see that he's jumping forward quite a bit. Now a jump forward and a jump backwards are 2 sides of the same coin. Both of them are less than ideal. Generally, if we have to pick one, a jump back is better than a jump forward in the snatch, but ideally we don't have a jump forward or a jump back. What's happening in this case is Joe is bringing his hips into the barbell too early as the barbell gets above the knee. So what's happening here, if we go through the rep, we'll see start position at the knee position is relatively solid, but watch Joe's hips before they pass as the barbell passes the knee. Watch Joe's hips, they immediately come into the barbell, and then as a result of this, we're pushing the barbell away horizontally. What Joe does then is he needs to jump forward underneath the barbell to catch it. So if you were to view this from the side, you would see that the hips coming in too soon pushes the barbell away from us. You can see he's really heavily on his toes here. Coupled with the fact that the hips have come into the barbell too soon, we'll see that the barbell is pushed forward. So what this often happens then is messes up our timing. When we need to jump forwards or backwards to catch a barbell, we're essentially playing a game of lotto, or we're playing a game of Russian roulette. We are trying to judge where exactly we've pushed that barbell towards or where we've pulled it back towards. So if we're jumping back underneath it or jumping forward underneath the barbell, we're trying to guess where it lands. And guess what this does? It messes up our timing. It messes up exactly when we catch the barbell. It messes up when the barbell lands on top of us. And very often this ends up causing this kind of press out at the bottom. So when we jump forward on the barbell, we're adding an inconsistency to this. And even if we jump forward every time, it's never as consistent as just jumping straight down underneath the barbell. So if we watch here, as he gets under, the barbell is mistimed, and then we get this press out. Now, what can Joe do here to rectify this issue? So there's a couple of options. First, we need to be looking at what kind of variations are used in Joe's training. One of the first things I'd start using here is some no-foot snatches. Now, no-foot snatches are fantastic because we can use them in one of 2 ways. We can use them in the warm-up. So Joe's snatching 110 kilos. Joe can do no-foot snatches plus regular snatches up to about 70 or 80 kilos. Then he can start working on just the regular foot movement snatches. And what this will allow him to do is correct this balance. Sometimes we need to learn the balance. We don't necessarily need to change positions too much yet. Sometimes people knock the barbell away even though they've hit good positions as they're heading towards the hip. So what we need to do here is first we'll start using this no foot snatch, or the other option we could do is we could have one session during the week where we just do no foot snatches and we push it pretty hard for weight and volume. I would start off with 5 or 6 sets of 3, keep the volume pretty high towards the end. Now a common thing you need to look out for when you're doing heavy no foot snatches is you need to put more speed into the barbell. A lot of times people get really slow. The foot movement aids in the speed when you're doing regular snatches, so you need to make sure that you're emphasizing that extension and the speed. Second option we could be doing here is some pause at the knee snatches, and the big thing Joe needs to focus on all his snatching, even in the no foot snatches, is at this position here that the hips stay back. So as soon as the hips come into the barbell, this lets us know that the second pull is essentially over and we've begun our extension. We want the second pull to last as long as possible because we want that barbell to travel back over our center of balance, because this is the best place for us to express our power. The further this barbell travels back towards these hips, the better we'll be able to display vertical power, and the better balance you'll have, the better barbell speed you'll have, and the more weight you'll lift. So we need to be really patient with these hips. So every time Joe is snatching, he needs to be conscious of not bringing his hips forward. And one of the other variations he could use to do this is some pause of the knee snatches. Now Joe doesn't bend his arms, which is great. So all he needs to look for when he's doing his pause of the knee snatches is to ensure that his hips don't come forward into the barbell. Let me interrupt the video really quickly just for 2 seconds. In the link below, there is 30 of our best insights into weightlifting. People are loving it. It'll send you 1 email a day for 30 days. It's some of the most important things we think you need to know about weightlifting. And if you're watching this, there's a good chance you need help. So click the link below and you won't regret it. There's some great information in there. Jake's up here, and Jake is incredibly fast underneath the barbell, and I actually really like this speed. So we'll see a lot of foot movement here. This is 75 kilo snatch at 72 kilo body weight, and I like the aggression in the pull under. Now, there is a point, I suppose, where we have maybe a bit too much foot elevation, but that would usually manifest itself in possibly being too slow underneath the barbell. However, for Jake, he is certainly not too slow underneath the barbell. And as weights get heavier, this foot movement height would actually become less. So that's not really what I'm concerned about today. What I'm concerned about, again, is that jump forward. And it's coming from a similar issue of the hips coming into the barbell, with the added effect that Jake is leaning back too much as he gets towards the hip. So when we were looking at Joe's snatch just previously, we'd see that the hips are coming in too soon. Now, Jake's hips are coming in a little bit too soon, but a lot of his problem is coming from the fact that he's directing those hips too much when he's bringing them in. So he's sending too much horizontal force this way. His torso is going back too much in the other direction. As a result, then we're swinging the barbell out here, and then we need to what? Jump underneath the barbell. We need to land underneath it in a guessing fashion. We need to jump forward underneath it. So what we need to do here is focus on what direction our hips send the barbell and what direction our torso goes, and we need to figure out how can we improve this. This is a very common issue, and I'll give you something that I've been using ever since I started coaching. I've been using this for years and years, and it's such a great complex. It's high pull plus snatch. In the same set, I want you to start off with 5 to 6 sets of 2 high pulls, 1 snatch, not a high pull rebend, not a panda pull, a fucking high pull where you pull the barbell up, you pull it really high, you're fully extended, the barbell is at least reaching your sternum, preferably nipple height or higher, you're really extended, there's no rebend of your lower body, your torso stays really straight, and then you do 2 reps of these before you go towards your 3rd rep, which is a full snatch. Then as the program progresses, you can drop one of those high pulls and you can go a little bit heavier with this complex. This works incredibly well. Another thing we could practice here is a little bit of muscle snatching in the warm-up. So generally what happens is if we push the hips too horizontally into the barbell and we lean back too much, we'll often cut our extension short, which is happening here slightly. So one thing we could do is some no contact snatches in the warm-up or no contact muscle snatches, just to emphasize that extension a little bit more. But the first thing I'll be looking at here is the high pull complex. Again, you could use the no foot snatches here to a certain extent, but I think in this case he'd be better served with the high pull complex plus regular snatch. Next up, we've got a really common issue here with Tyreek. He's attempting 98 kilos for a double, and he's doing something that a lot of lifters will tend towards, but it's actually a very hard style of pull to make work. And that is knees moving out as the barbell moves up. So we can see at this position, Tyreek's knees are really pushed out here. The shins aren't at vertical, they're slightly inclined here. And if we go back a little bit further, we'll see that the toes will actually raise up and we'll lose a lot of that kind of center foot pressure that we're often looking for. Now, this knees out position isn't particularly a problem for absolutely everybody, but rarely have I seen an amateur or intermediate weightlifter make it work. Now, some pros make it work, some great lifters, but we can see here in the 2nd rep, it causes an issue that's really, really common. We'll see that barbell again, knees are really pushed out here, but then we end up missing the barbell forward, and this is a really common issue. So why is the knees out a problem for most people? So when I'm talking about snatching or technique, or when we're talking about technique, we're always talking about the average everyday lifter. That's the person we're trying to help as much as possible here. Do we coach some good lifters? Absolutely. Do I let them do this? No, I don't. But for everybody watching this, there's a great chance that this isn't going to work well for you, and there's a couple of issues. Now, I know people like Andrea Ramnoff does this. I've actually asked him and talked to him about this. I made a whole video about it, talking about it. He himself recommends that people don't do this. He said it very often causes problems. I know there's some good active lifters. One of my favorite lifters at the moment is the Kazakhstan 73 kilo lifter. His name is escaping me at the moment, but he's so powerful. It works really well for him. His snatching is excellent. It's not that it can't work, but all I'm saying is I just don't see it working. So what I'm talking about is as the barbell moves up, the knees are moving out instead of moving back. So what we're always trying to do, essentially the goal of the 1st and 2nd pull of the snatch, is bring the barbell back over your center of balance to express the most amount of power. And the thing that facilitates this most consistently is knees primarily moving back until that shin angle is close to vertical in the snatch. If we keep our knees pushed out here, we're creating a lot of demands on the system. We need lots of quad strength, we need lots of back strength, we need lots of hip external rotation, but we also then are lacking really the ability to bring that barbell back towards us, because no matter how much we push our knees out, for most lifters, this is never out enough that the barbell is traveling back towards you. What this often does is keeps the barbell really far forward during the first and second pull, and as a result, we have to bring the hips into the barbell, and then when they end up failing on the second rep like this. So these hips are coming into the barbell too soon. We end up bumping the barbell away, and then as a result of that, the barbell is knocked out in front of us. So in terms of the start position, I'm actually happy for some people to push their knees out. That's totally fine. As long as the knees gradually or primarily move back in the start position during that first and second pull is what I'm concerned about. Sometimes we need to push our knees out in the start position to create more room for our back. If you're a bigger gentleman, if you have a lot of musculature, pushing your knees out will allow more extension in the lower back, which is generally a better position to hit during your second and third pull, because this allows a better hip extension. So here, what we're looking for is those knees moving back in this position. Now, the second thing we need to look at is the footwear and foot movement. Moving our feet in the snatch provides us a lot of benefits. It generally adds better bar speed. It adds more reactive strength when we hit the bottom of the snatch. We also need to move our feet from this pulling position into our catching position. The reason this is important is because our pulling position is always going to be more narrow than our catching position, because our pulling position, we want a lot of leg drive from the ground. The narrower we are with this pulling position, the greater leg use we will get. And then this catching position needs to be wider than our pulling position, because the wider position allows us more room to sit our hips in between the barbell, and it allows us more room for our hips to sit in between our heels. As a result, we're going to be more upright, which is a more stable catch position. So here we need to look at actually moving the feet. Now, lastly, we also need to look at actually using weightlifting shoes. Now, he's a very flexible individual. He's got good positions in the first make, which is great here. So if we look at the bottom position, we'll see great ankle mobility, fantastic. And part of that is probably is actually from training without weightlifting shoes, which is a benefit at certain points. Good hip mobility. He's good thoracic and lumbar extension, which I'm happy about. Good position in the shoulders. But even if you've great mobility like this individual, Tyreek here, having weightlifting shoes is still going to make this better. It's going to make you more stable. And then learning to move the feet is definitely something you want to be doing. Now, how do we fix these issues? So first off, we could be looking at addressing what we think is most important. The first thing I'd be looking at is the first or second pull and the at the knee position. So I'd be looking at pauses at knee snatches here, probably being one of the better options to fix this. Or we could do some snatch grip deadlifts plus snatches. But on the snatch grip deadlift, we really focus on bringing the knees back, and we reinforce that movement as much as possible. And then we follow it up with a full snatch from the floor. This is the first thing I'll be looking at. This could take quite a while. What often happens when we change from that knees out to knees back, we'll see the shoulders will tip forward a little bit too much to balance. So we need to make sure that the chest doesn't drop too much when we switch from the knees going out to the knees going back. Then in terms of foot movement, we just need to practice that foot movement. We need to start learning how it feels, and we need to start getting the reps in where we move the feet. So next up, we've got Hansen lifting in what looks to be one of the coolest gyms we can manage. Now, he can't drop the barbell on the marble floor, but he does have a great view, so there's a lot to be said for that in a nice, clean gym. So we've got a couple of issues with Hansen snatch that we need to look at. The first one is the really aggressive arm bend as he gets closer to the hip, and we can see there's quite a bit of arm bend as he is actually at the hip position. Now, this is really aggressive arm bend, and we can see this also probably assisting in causing some of those heels to raise too much too soon. So the issue with the arm bend, there's a couple of issues. One of the main ones is that when we bend our arms at the hip, what we're often doing is we're reducing the engagement of our upper body during the third pull or the extension. So what's really important during that extension or the third pull is that when we're extending, we need the engagement of the traps to move first. Arms will be relatively straight here, somewhat loose, and then we pull with the elbows after the traps have extended. We want the traps to guide the bar up and keep it close, and then we pull with the arms after this. However, if we've pulled with the arms too early, it's hard for us to extend our traps fully, and it's even harder then to engage the arms to turn the barbell over fast and succinctly in that third pull. The other thing we need to be looking at is the fact that the barbell will often slow down. So if we shift the load to our arms, if we bend with our arms, we're shifting some of that load. Your arms aren't going to be as strong as your back or your legs. What's often going to happen is you're going to slow the barbell down prematurely. Even if it's a small amount, we don't want any amount of reduction in speed. It's hard enough to get a barbell to move fast in weightlifting without making it harder for ourselves by bending our arms. The second thing we need to look at, and that's probably contributing to some of that arm bend, is the initial pull off the floor is too aggressive. There's this thing in weightlifting known as the 2-beat rhythm. This is what the Soviets would have called it. But essentially it's fast off the floor, but faster above the knee. We need to go faster above the knee than we are going off the floor. What's happening here for Hansen is he's really aggressively pulling off the floor. Barbell slows down a little bit, then we get this arm bend engaged, and we're messing up a lot of the timing and positions by the time we get to the hip. So what we need to practice here is slowing down that first pull. This will probably help with the reduction of the early arm bend, because a lot of times when we pull too fast off the floor, we tense up really aggressively. We miss some of our positions, but our arms take a little bit too much of that load. So we want to smoothen out that first pull. We want to practice those positions, making sure we're not bending the arms. We're keeping the arms relatively straight when we're at the hip. There might be some little bit of flexion for some people, but much less than we have here for Hansen. Now, what's a good way of practicing this? Slow pull snatches are a great way. Getting rid of the arm bend is very, 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 very hard for a lot of people in weightlifting. To be honest with you, it shouldn't be. You should literally just be able to go in and snatch and learn to not bend your arms too early. It shouldn't be that hard to stop doing it, but evidently lots and lots of lifters have a hard time reducing the engagement of the arms. So one thing we could do is slow down the speed. This will help with two reasons for Hansen. This will help him control that first and second pull speed more, but it also give him time to think through not using those arms. So we need to walk before we run. If we learn these positions first slowly, this will let him learn these positions and increase the speed when he needs to increase it and decrease the engagement of his arms. So slow pull snatches, you can use these in your warm-up, or you can give a full session where we do really slow pull snatches. For a while, I would probably do both of these until the issue seems to be rectified. Here we've got a Finnish lifter. I'm not going to attempt to say his name. Tuko Hutimaki, fair enough. So we've got a bit of a jump back here. Now this is a PB snatch 107. As far as PBs go, this is very, very sharp, and it's a very good PB, especially if it's in competition. You are doing a great job. Very cool competition venue as well, it must be said. So we can see where this lifter starts. We can see where he is here, and if we watch where he ends up finishing, we're getting quite a bit of jump back. Now, as we talked about earlier in the video, jumping back is a problem because we're adding uncertainty to where we're going to catch the barbell. We're adding a game of lotto where we're trying to dictate, or we're trying to guess where that barbell is going to end up. So every time you swing that barbell, what you're doing is adding a larger distance to the barbell's path. A larger swing, if you were to draw it out in a straight line, would be longer than a barbell that isn't swung as much. So as a result, the barbell travels in a larger arc during the extension. As a result, you need to drop back to catch it because it goes in this little upside down J hook or the top of an S. So you need to jump back to catch the barbell. Every time we do this, we're adding more uncertainty. We're making it harder to find where the barbell is going to end up. So how do we fix this, and what's causing it in this particular lifter's positions? So if we look at the actual first pull, start position is pretty solid, but we can see that we're tending towards this slightly knees out position here. But the primary issue is the hips are coming into the barbell just a bit too early. And it's very, very subtle, the difference between hips coming in too early and hips coming into the right place. And this is a problem with weightlifting, or rather, this is the symptom of weightlifting. This is a feature of weightlifting. It's not a bug. Centimeters and millimeters of differences in weightlifting are things that make a very, very, very big difference. Hips delayed by half a second is the difference between him not jumping back and him jumping back a lot and missing 110 or 112 kilos next. So what we need to do here is focus on not bringing the hips in too early at this position. Another thing that's actually happening as well as he's pulling is he's dropping his chest a little bit. Now this often will assist in the hips coming in too early, because if we drop our chest a small bit, we're pushing our balance a little bit too far forward, and what will often happen then as a result to try and balance this, your hips will come in too early to try and balance the system. Your body tries really hard to do things automatically, and we've done lots of snatching, and if you're north of 100 kilos, you've probably done quite a bit of snatching so far, certainly enough for your body to learn that it needs to try and stay in a balanced position. So if the chest is dropping just a little bit and those hips are coming in just a little bit too soon, we'll see that we'll get this jump back because the hips will come in too early. Now, again, it's a good snatch, but there's always things we can work on. What I'd be working on here, probably again, I would be looking at pause snatches, or in this case, I might use some low hang snatches and really focus on keeping those hips back as the barbell passes the knee and as the barbell travels up along the thigh towards the contact or extension position. Low hang snatches are great for a lot of lifters because it allows us to practice the chest up, but also keep the hips back.